we would like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you for entering your name, where you're from, and your organization from your chat. So please continue to do so as those who are joining us a little bit after the start time. So welcome everyone. Again, my name is Sabrina Baptiste. I'm the Program Operations Director and Program Manager for Pathways Alliance and LabCorp Fellowship for Innovate EDU. For our agenda today, we will do some welcoming of some amazing folks and introductions. We will also talk about the process for creating the shared definition, key features of the teacher residencies, potential uses for the residency definition, and closing and next steps. I would like to introduce a little bit about Pathways Alliance. Pathways Alliance is an uncommon coalition of leading K-12 and higher education organizations dedicated to supporting and implementing diverse and inclusive educator preparation pipelines, including teacher residency programs. And hopefully after this wonderful conversations, we'll get some apprenticeships in there as well. Pathways Alliance was started by Innovate EDU and the Learning Policy Institute, and since then has grown to amazing partners and founders, and also some folks that are joining us today. So thank you all for joining the Alliance, and we hope to continue this amazing work together. We do ask that everyone on this call or tell a friend to sign up for the Pathways news. We give you information about Pathways Alliance webinars, our resource digest, and we will also send you our monthly newsletter. To sign up, please go to thepathwaysalliance.org and enter your email and start receiving some of the best news ever. Again, we ask for any folks that are joining us now, please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, where you're joining us from, and your organization. We do ask that throughout this webinar, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type up your questions in the Q&A. Teacher residency programs are providing significant benefit to school districts, teacher residents, and the students they serve, especially since teacher vacancies are now on the rise. Student teaching has always been an important part of our future, especially for teacher prep. So to engage us further in this conversation, I would like to introduce some of our amazing folks that has put work into this definition. I would like to introduce Karen DeMoss, Executive Director of Be Prepared to Teach, Bank Street College of Education, Jill Pittner, Chief Growth Officer, National Center for Teacher Residencies, Tara Kinney, Chief of Staff and Director of State Policy, Learning Policy Institute. Thank you, ladies, for having this wonderful conversation with us. And I will now pass it off to Tara Kinney, who will lead us off.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. And I think before passing it to our fearless co-leaders of the Pathways Alliance Working Group on Teacher Residencies, Jill and Karen, I just wanted to share a little bit about why we took up this work as the Pathways Alliance. So I think you've all joined this call today because you've seen how teacher residencies have really gained momentum across the country in the past 15 years or so. They have a very strong evidence base behind them as an approach to teacher preparation that can address teacher recruitment and retention challenges that we're seeing really across the country taking off in this current moment as we go back to school with huge numbers of vacancies across the country. And they bring greater diversity to our educator workforce, which is much needed. Today, there are more than 100 residency programs across the country, which is really exciting to see this high quality approach growing. I think the federal government has really helped spur this movement towards residencies. You know, back in 2008, when they reauthorized when Congress reauthorized the Higher Education Act, they created the Teacher Quality Partnership Grant Program, and that really helped launch teacher residency programs in many states and districts across the country. The reauthorization of ESSA in 2015 called out residencies as an allowable use of Title II Part A funds, and that helped to further expand the approach. But we've also seen a lot of different approaches to teacher residencies popping up across the country, both state investment and policies, as well as local programs. States as diverse as California, Delaware, Mississippi, Montana, New Mexico, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, Washington, West Virginia, and I'm sure we've left some off the list. And I know we have folks from states joining us today. We're really excited to have you here. All of these states have statewide policies to support teacher residencies. Federal Recovery Act funds have also been helping states and districts to invest in teacher residencies. Texas, I know, put $90 million of their ESSER funds into their new residency program. West Virginia and Montana are using stipends, are providing stipends for residents using their ESSER dollars as well. And the US Department of Education has called out the residency approach in their guidance for how to use Federal Recovery Act dollars and to support recovery from the pandemic. And at the same time that we see all this good work happening, there are individual programs popping up in places that are using the term residency, but aren't necessarily aligned to the broader field. And there's some confusion out there, quite frankly. I know that's something New York, for example, recently sought to correct via policy. So that's why Pathways Alliance took up this work. We were seeking to do some field alignment that would bring interested organizations together to help provide some clarity for the field and to inform the development of residency policy and practice as it moves forward in other states and districts and in the higher ed community. And so we took up this work. Karen and Jill did a tremendous job leading it, and I am going to pass it over to them to talk about what we did and where we came with the work.
Tara, thank you so much. It's so great to have you share with us the context so that we can think about what has been the evolution of residencies over time. So thank you so much for taking us like a walk down memory lane. Appreciate that. So as you mentioned, the working group came together and our goal was to help clarify for the field, what is a teacher residency? And so we are pleased today to be releasing this paper towards a national definition of teacher residencies, and spending our time today on this webinar to share with you the process. How did we get to this definition? What's the structure of the paper? We're going to unpack that with you as well. And we're also going to take a little time to highlight some of the components and elements in the paper. So let's start with thinking about the purpose of this paper. Again, we want this paper to be used by local stakeholders in order to discuss and examine residency design and implementation. We also hope that this paper can be used by policymakers and philanthropists in order for them to have a concise yet thorough definition to help guide policies and funding decisions. Because after all, our goal is that we are designing and implementing teacher residency programs in order to attract, prepare, and retain diverse and effective teachers for our students. We can move to the next slide. So now what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the process. How did we create this paper? What was the work? So as Tara said, within the Pathways Alliance, we formed a working group because we wanted to clarify the definition and work together to do that. So we had folks in the working group with different backgrounds, working collaboratively and constructively in order to push each other so that we could define teacher residencies for the field. My co-leader is Karen Damas, and so we've spent the last 6 months facilitating the working group, and you can see in this visual that there were many steps along the way. And so I'm not going to go really deep within each step, but just very big picture, let you know that we brought together that diverse group in the working group in order to draft the elements and components of the residency model. Then we took our draft out to a large group of stakeholders. We needed a network of folks from across teacher prep and teacher quality, with a focus on teacher quality. We wanted their input and guidance as well. So we sought their input. We received that and got back together as a working group, took that feedback, integrated it, and created almost a brand new version, just about the 2.0, after integrating that feedback. And then next, we took that version to the Pathways Alliance, to members and founding partners in the Pathways Alliance, in order to seek their input and to answer the questions that were coming up, clarify questions as well. And last, we got to a penultimate. Karen titled it the penultimate version. I will be honest, it was penultimate for a little while. And so there were multiple penultimates. And we worked with that version for quite a bit, and really kind of wrestling with the ideas that all the stakeholders along the way that had shared. And now here we are today, releasing the paper and hosting this webinar in order to share it with you all. Wow. We wanted to create this slide so that you could see that this paper wasn't, created in a back room with a working group, that we had the opportunity to seek input and hear from our colleagues in the field. So we created this slide so you could visually see that there was a lot of input from across the country, across many states, in order for us to improve this definition, again, to achieve our hopes, that it can be used locally and to help guide policy as well. The next thing we'd like to do is hear from some of the working group members. We've invited them to the call, and we have several working group members that are going to jump in now and share a takeaway that they have from participating in the working group. So I was watching the stream and I got to see you all log in. I might have missed some of you, but for sure, I see Jacqueline Rodriguez. She's the Vice President of Research Policy and Advocacy at AACTE. So we'd love to hear from you first.
Thanks, Jill. I want to say thank you to not just the working group leads, but all of the members of the working group. As Jill produced that slide, it made me feel so filled with joy and fulfillment that we accomplished something pretty tremendous with the entirety of the field. And so I want to say thank you to those of you who are on the call that also contributed, because I know we reached out to so many. The feedback was plentiful, and we took everybody's feedback into consideration and applied it. So it was absolutely done with the best of intentions, and I think the truest form of collaboration in the field. So my takeaway from the working group is thinking about how we could have not just varied perspectives, but what I loved is that we had very varied hierarchy within organizations as well. So it wasn't just the presidents and CEOs, the executive directors, the vice presidents, et cetera, from other organizations. It was the folks, as we call our teachers. It was the folks who are actually doing the work, the policy and advocates, the government relations, the concrete program specialists who really understand how residency definitions will impact the field moving forward to ensure we have high quality preparation for all of our candidates. And so I was just overjoyed to participate alongside those colleagues and also to learn alongside them. And so I really appreciated being a part of the working group. And I'll let that stay there, and then we'll shift to somebody else so I can learn some more.
Thank you. We truly appreciate you. And also, just reinforcing that you're a true learner, and that's how you show up. So we really appreciate that. Courtney Rowland, we'd love to hear from you. Courtney is the Director of State and Federal Policy at the National Center for Teacher Residencies, and my colleague.
Yes. Thank you, Jill. Thanks to the Pathways Alliance and all of the partners and leaders in that coalition for all of the work that's been done so far, and I know that will continue, and the work that went into this working group and this definition. It's really great. I wanted to share two quick reflections from my experience working on the working group with this team. The first one is that I'm a relatively new member of the NCTR team. I came on board about 8 months ago. And when I came on board, this working group was just launching. And it was the first time that I'd met and had the chance to work with a lot of these organizations and with the team you see here and others. And what I came to understand pretty quickly, and that I want to share with everybody on this webinar, is that what I think drives a lot of this work and the work that these folks do is a deep appreciation for teachers and the teaching profession, and a commitment to continuously improving teaching and learning. And I think we came back to that often during these conversations, and I wanted you all in this webinar to know that. The other quick reflection I'll share and then pass it along is just how essential I think a definition like this is for our field. As Tara was explaining earlier, with such a recent accumulation of research and promising practices around a strategy or an approach like teacher residencies, it really makes good sense to put pen to paper and sort of establish where we're at with our understanding and what's emerging, and index it in a way so that we can keep building and keep improving based on what we know. So I hope this definition gets used in a lot of ways going forward, and that it serves as a good anchor for all of us as we work in our work ahead.
Thanks,
Thank
Courtney.
you.
Appreciate it. And now I'd love to introduce Monica Ibanez, an education specialist from Innovation Center for Educator Prep in Texas. We'd love to hear from you next.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. I think we're going to start hearing trends in the reflections that we've had as a small group. But as everyone else, I was very thankful to have worked with a group of people that was truly dedicated to elevating the teaching profession and really focusing on the recognition and the compensation for the work that educators do. Teacher residents, as we know, remove the traditional silos between pre and in-service, creating a more coherent learning experience for our teacher candidates. This work group really modeled the relationship that we want EVPs and districts to have, in the sense that we engage a very diverse group of people with a wide variety of experiences and backgrounds, but also ensuring the multiple voices from the field were here and then utilized in the final version of this document. So I really appreciated that like mentality of we're all in this together and we are all one this to really come out as a quality document that people can use all over the nation. So, and then, of course, related to my work, when we provide technical assistance to alternative certification programs, and one of our goals is to support them as they create their own residency pathways to increase that practice in the classroom before becoming a teacher of record. So this collaboration really provided us with a space to reflect in making sure that because we provide technical assistance in such a specialized pathway, that we didn't get into our own silos and heard other voices too. So very thankful to be part of this work and looking forward to seeing how this is going to evolve. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And thanks for, highlighting that we welcomed voices, not only in the working group, but then across the country. And as Jackie said, at all different levels, and that inclusivity, I appreciate you noting that. And last, we'd love to hear from Maria Heiler. Maria is the director at Ed Prep Lab within LPI. Thanks.
Hello. Thank you, Jill. And I wanted to first say thank you to you, Jill and Karen, for your excellent leadership and all the members of the work group. And I am more of a peripheral member, so I give my kudos to the work that was done more as an observer than an insider. And I think that's an important perspective as well. I think that what I observed and experienced was a passion project from the working group and a real commitment to come together on a much needed goal. And, to iterate what was said before, it's hard to go third when you have also well articulated everything I wanted to say. But, when a research-based and evidence-proven teacher pathways is identified and lifted up, we get language appropriation. And so it's so important. This document right now is so important to really help steer and guide the work so that we continue to strengthen the profession and not water down a model that we know works well. So just really excited to see the commitment around that and the work that was being done. And I want to note especially, as people say, the work was so thorough. And really appreciate the transparency and outreach that was mentioned so much. You saw the slides with all the different outreach. And it was a process that, sometimes you go behind doors and you're like, we should definitely ask these folks and not those folks. But this was really transparent and very inclusive. And I think, that modeled what we want to see in education and in the way that we think about change and innovation is being inclusive and coming together in a way that we can agree on what the research says and then what a model should look like. And finally, as director of Ed Prep Lab, which is, for those of you who are unfamiliar, a network of teacher and leader preparation programs committed to transforming educator preparation, we have programs that have residencies and they're doing great work. And then we have programs that are interested in developing residencies. So this type of guidance and this type of definition is so welcome and needed in the work that we're doing in that space as well. So thank you. Really appreciate the work being done.
Thanks, Maria.
I think I'm taking it from here. So next slide can come on. I just want to say thanks on top of all the thanks. Everything that was said feels so much like what Jill and I experienced. Jill and I occasionally say, gosh, what are we going to do without each other? Because we've had such a wonderful 6 months working with everyone. But we're going to turn now to the report itself. So Zach has a couple of times, I think, chatted the link. Zach, if you'll chat that link one more time. And that is the report as it exists. I want to call out on that first page of the report something that we hope reflects the theme that you heard from some of the participants in this work, that we intend this to be used. We don't intend this to be a gatekeeper for anyone. And we intend this to be helpful to you in the ways that make sense locally. For that reason, this is produced under the Creative Commons license where you can repurpose this work. You can see all the details about that later, but we intend this for you to be able to make this yours. That said, we worked really hard to bring to you the best of the ideas from across the country around what folks have found to matter to if you're trying to create a really strong teacher residency. So that's where we're going to turn now. The slide that you see right now is sort of the top level of 3 levels of how we ended up constructing the structure of this document. Thank you to many on this call whose names I saw register, who suggested what ended up driving this structure for the document. So the overall definition is what you see right now. You can see that teacher residencies are preparation pathways. They're anchored in partnerships where LEAs and prep programs collaboratively design the resident curriculum. And so the aspiring teachers can afford to do this good work, and the instruction and staffing needs of local LEAs are met. And during that year-long time together, they are engaging in pre-service, i.e. not teacher of record work, working alongside a qualified mentor. So that probably isn't a very surprising definition to those of you who are doing residency work. But we tried to get all of what we thought were the major components inside that summary definition to be supportive of something like a state conversation about what should they be sure to think about as they might be considering any guidance or legislation or policies around residencies. You can go to the next slide now. And the next slide shows how we worked to structure this particular document. We had so many really, really fabulous ideas from across the field about things that programs had found were really important for their own success. And in that first version, like the definitely version 1.0, I think actually version 2.0 jumped all the way to 4.0. Don't you agree, Jill? It was so different after all the feedback. In that first version, we had incorporated a lot of things that folks said, this is a really good idea. You should put that in there as a sort of a holistic picture. And the field said back to us, those are great ideas, but everybody can't do that. That's not going to work everywhere. Can you figure out a way to separate out what's critical in these definitional pieces and then give people a little bit of flexibility to understand what's helpful? So the structure is you've got that overall definition, you saw it in the last slide, and then we have 4 components that we do think are critical, and they have their own definitional elements, and then their own definitions. And then we have elements in those components that programs across the country agreed have been helpful to them. Those are elements that obviously we would suggest every partnership take a look at and seriously work towards, but they're also not definitional to what a teacher residency is. So that's how it's structured. So we hope that that structural these are the absolute components everybody agreed on, and here are some elements that you should look at, is going to be helpful to localities. You'll notice also in that opening work that we say, because this is Creative Commons license, you may have improvements. Please let us know. We would like to make adjustments to a living document as the field finds better ways to create a definition for residencies. Next slide. I'm going to start on the first 2 of the component pieces we have. I should have said that in the last slide, but you could probably read it. You have the component of partnerships, the component of curriculum, the component of resident experiences, and the component of mentors. So I'm going to talk about the first 2 components. And the first component is partnership. That was very intentional on the group's part because of the experience across the country that while you might have a structure of somebody being inside a school for a year, if you don't have a partnership that really tries to link the work of the preparation program provider and the work and needs inside a district and school, then you're not really doing what a residency can do. You're not really able to achieve all of the kinds of things that the research on strong residencies have said are necessary. So the partnership is the first component definition. In that, you'll notice 2 key themes. First, it is the foundation of residencies. It rests on those deep partnership programs, partnerships between programs and their P12 colleagues. And those partnerships are more than just good working relationships. They co-construct vision, they co-construct programmatic designs, they make shifts on either side to be sure that the overall goals are met. The second foundational theme in partnerships is that they embrace twin objectives. First objective is supporting instruction during the academic year for the P12 student. So you want to support what's going on in the school so that kids in the school are learning better, they're having better educational experiences. And the second is that residency experience must guard, keep sacred the ability for that resident to really learn, because there is a science of learning and development. There is a lot of disciplinary knowledge about how much people have to learn to be able to be good teachers. That's got to be part of how you design your residency curriculum. And the partnerships embrace both of those goals together, instead of one side focusing on one thing and the other side focusing on the other thing. So that's the partnership. In components pieces, you see all of those icons down below. Those are all described inside the definitional document, if you've got that open. And each of the components has those elements with some definitional pieces in them. One of the things that we're going to do in this webinar is just sort of highlight one of the elements in each of the components. And we chose to highlight the element of resident funding for the partnerships. That's because not every residency today has resident funding. We understand that. Everyone understands that. It is a limitation of growing residencies, and we're all working on that. Yet, if you really want your residency to achieve the goals that your partnership would have, which would of course be, let's have everybody come through residencies. Let's have people from all sorts of backgrounds be able to afford these, that the return on their own investment of time and their capacity to engage is full, then partnerships would want to explore resident funding. So that's why the elements aren't definitional, but they really are a part of being able to realize the full goals of residency. So I hope that gives a good example of how the component is definitional to residencies, and then the elements, all of those little icons you see, all of the bullets in the report, those are things that really make a big difference that all of us, we think, should be trying to strive towards. So that's sort of how the next 3 slides will go in terms of the other components. You can flip to the next slide now. So for the component of curriculum, in this one, very often in early residency work, the coursework and curriculum was over here, and then people had residency experiences over here. The field has developed quite a bit in really beautiful ways. And residency partnerships are now finding that the curriculum is really a part of the overall experience of the residents. So when you are working to either improve or develop your residency program, you're going to want to integrate the program's curriculum with the residents' clinical experiences so that those 2 things are not experienced as separate. Assignments, assessments within the curriculum, they're integrated into that placement. It gives ample opportunities for the candidate to explore their own professional identities and guided opportunities to reflect on their practice at the same time that they are doing the work in school, and all of those things align together. One of the things that we had a lot of conversations about is how integrating assignments and assessments actually can, as one of our partnerships says, blow the curriculum open. That if you put some of that curricular work inside the school building, because they're in there in a praxis situation all year long, that sometimes can free up some space in your quote unquote regular curriculum when you're back on campus, if you are, can free up some of that space to do things like add a special education certification or a little bit more depth on something like trauma-informed instruction. So there's some possibilities when you do this deep integration with your curriculum that you can strengthen what your candidates are able to learn through their traditional classroom instruction at the program side. So that's those 2 parts, and I'm passing it back over to Jill.
Thanks, Karen. So as we look at the next component, it's the resident experience. And this is the part that everyone gets very, very excited about. This is about the resident spending a full academic year pre-service alongside a mentor teacher. So this is the combined investment in that candidate, right? So we are going to integrate the curriculum that Karen just talked about and ensure that it is complementary to the resident's clinical experience in the classroom so that there's reciprocity and it really creates a coherent preparation for the teaching for the resident, the teaching candidate. So as we said, that program, the coursework is aligned, and we've got the candidate teaching and learning alongside a mentor teacher, learning all of the skills that it takes to be an effective teacher. Programs are designed so that the residents have the time and the resources that they need to ensure that that residency experience sets them up to become day 1 ready teachers of record. So the beauty of the residency model is that candidates are entering the classroom. These residents and graduates of residency programs are entering the classroom after completing the program, having the coursework and the clinical experience ready to be teacher of record for the students that they serve. And as Karen described, the icons below talk about in this section, these are the elements that are highlighted under this component. The one that we wanted to talk about right now is the engagement in school communities. When we think about that resident clinical experience, we need to recognize that during that clinical experience, they're working with a mentor teacher, but it's also really important to know that they are part of a school community and that students' community as well, We know that teachers no longer work in silos, that no longer is it just a teacher shutting their door, that teachers need to collaborate with their peers across the school, with school staff, in order to be effective and to access the assets and knowledge of their peers in order to meet student needs. So we want to be sure that during the resident clinical experience, that clinical experience provides opportunities for candidates to become better teachers and better serve their students by collaborating across the school and being engaged in that school community. And then the last component that we're going to look at on the next slide is the mentor. This is something that I always get very excited about, because I really see that the role of the mentor is that they serve as a clinical teacher educator. Mentors need to be skilled PK-12 teachers who have the ability to articulate their own instructional practices. It takes real skill to be able to describe and deconstruct your practice with a novice teacher, and to be able to describe the instructional decisions that you made. There could be really effective teachers out there working with students, but this is a skill on top of teaching students that is required of mentors. We also know that mentors need to create the time and space within their classroom for residents to enact practice, so that mentors are observing, evaluating, and coaching their residents, because the resident had an opportunity to enact practice independently alongside their mentor. As I said, the mentor takes on that role as clinical educator, and as such, they're monitoring the resident progress. Remember, I mentioned that reciprocity between the clinical and the coursework. We want to ensure that the mentor is monitoring the resident's clinical practice and therefore informing what's happening in the coursework, and that there is reciprocity. You can look at the icons there. We know it's very important that if a mentor is going to take on this additional responsibility, that they should be compensated. That's one icon I just wanted to show you, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper in the professional learning and leadership. It is important that we recognize that mentors taking on this position, that they're leading from within the classroom, and that we recognize this leadership position, which is why I mentioned compensation. That's one way. And the other thing we want to be thinking about when we think about professional learning and leadership as an element of this component is that mentors, they need professional development. They need to have professional development opportunities and support in order for them to hone their skills as a clinical teacher educator. This is also an opportunity for mentors to get together with other mentors to learn and share practice. One thing I heard when we were talking about the working group is really that opportunity to learn from one another. And we'd want to mirror those opportunities with our mentors, that they're getting professional learning opportunities where they have the opportunity to work with their peers, other mentors.
So I think it's back to me now. So thank you, Karen and Jill, for walking us through the definition and helping us to really unpack that. And to you, the working group members, and to all of our stakeholders and other engaged members in this process that provided feedback along the way. It definitely got stronger as we worked. And we hope this definition will be actively taken up and used by the field. We see a number of ways it may be used at the local level, both to strengthen existing programs and inform the design of new ones. We hope it can inform the development of state policies around residencies, including within the program approval process and in nomenclature, and potentially in making funding determinations for state grant programs. There may be other uses determining state, federal, and philanthropic grant parameters, for example. There's a lot of momentum around apprenticeships into teaching right now, and this definition could perhaps inform the design of these approaches, given the close relationship between the concept of a residency and what an apprenticeship is. We would really welcome the thinking of this group today on how it might be used. I think it'd be great to have you drop, if you have other ideas, drop those in the chat, please. I think it would really add to our conversation. And with that, I want to pass it back to Karen and Jill for the next stages of this conversation.
I think our next slide is a thank you. Oh, we didn't get to see the thank you, but we can say thank you. And we are to questions now. So Jill, we've got a couple, and I'm going to take, there's one in the chat about affordability, and then we have two that are in the Q&A. I'm going to read all three of those and then give us sort of a system perspective, kind of linking those. And then if you will take whatever additional pieces, and then please continue to add any other questions. So Alex's question is, how the definition was developed or reviewed through a race, equity, diversity, and inclusion framework and lens, especially as we consider historical and contemporary barriers to entry and completion for educators of color. Then Eric's wondered, are all current residency programs partnered with a master's program in education? The answer is definitely no on that, which we say early on in the paper, by the way. Or do some partners partner with undergraduate programs? Yes, they do. Is partnering with undergraduate programs preferred from an affordability standpoint? So hold on that question. And then that third one that I saw in the chat, let me come back to Lee wonders, I'd like to know more about compensated roles and see what everyone thinks is an affordable pathway into the profession. So I'm going to actually center. So Mary, I can't read yours and talk at the same time. So we'll leave yours for Jill's if I don't get to it for some reason. I'm going to center this conversation on Alex's question. I would say that the group was committed primarily to being sure that what we can do in the education profession diversifies the teaching force and removes barriers. So this was a central purpose of our wanting to come together and to include the concepts of affordability, of paid roles, of compensation, because without compensation, you're not going to begin to get rid of some of the barriers. We didn't in this report deal with barriers like, test scores or GPAs. That's a sort of a different topic from the definition of a residency, those things came up. But whether somebody can enter a residency has a lot to do with whether they can work for free for a year. And basically most people can't. And that disproportionately lands on people who historically have been underrepresented in the field. So that's why, despite some folks in the field thinking that the pay part was not definitional to residencies, we insisted as a group in keeping that in. We understand the funding sources don't completely exist across the country for that. The apprenticeships offer some kind of a possibility for that. The state investments that Tara was noting at the beginning of this hour offer other possibilities for that. And so we wanted that lens to be there. And I hope that that's enough. And if it's not, if you have other ideas of a lens on the questions of race, equity, diversity, and inclusion, please do let us know. We would want to include those. But Eric and Eric and Lee, in terms of those questions of affordability and compensated roles, Zach is going to chat 3 reports. Our group has existed for about 7 years, specifically on sustainable funding for affordable residencies. He's going to chat you one piece called Simple Shifts. That shows a lot of the things that people do in roles that create some flexible staffing possibilities with existing dollars, so no new dollars for districts and schools that happen all over the country. So those are some idea sources for you. There's another one that we co-authored with LPI on some examples of ways that people have brought funding into their programs that is sustainable in California. And then the last one is really sort of a future visioning about rethinking the way we spend our district dollars to really invest in this human capital piece. So there's 3 reports for you there that help with some ideas on compensated roles that can help make things affordable. So with that, I will turn it over to Jill for a minute.
Great. Thanks, Karen. And so the papers that are in the chat, one goal of the Pathways Alliance is that it is a repository. So many of the resources, well, the definition for sure you will find there, as well as some of these resources. So just want you to know that after this, you can always go into the Pathways Alliance website to find other resources and tools as well. So going back to the question on equity, I think one thing I wanted to share with you all is NCTR. Our work is helping to build teacher residencies, as well as helping to scale and support existing residencies. And what we did is we ran focus groups with residents of color from across our network. And what the purpose for that was to understand, why did you choose a residency? What was it about the residency that spoke to you? And so, to your question, Alex, I think it was Alex. I wanted to make a couple connections. So that paper is called Residencies, a Vehicle for Recruiting Teachers of Color. One is about the recruitment strategies and building relationships with candidates. The other learnings in that paper is about design of residency programs, which comes out loud and clear in this definition, that the residents of color that participate in our focus group were looking for an opportunity to learn alongside an experienced mentor, that they didn't want to fast track into the field, that they wanted robust training and they wanted to have mentorship. So in the residency definition, we're including that as part of the design and the definition in the model. So I wanted you to know that we're using the research and our understandings about what's attracting teachers of color to the field and ensuring that the model includes those components and elements. Affordability, yes. So, we did talk about, we believe that residents are spending a full year teaching and learning alongside a mentor teacher. And we think that the idea of expecting these candidates who are learning to teach to now have a job at night and on the weekends in order to help pay tuition and help keep themselves afloat is inequitable. And no other profession would ask an aspiring candidate to do this to their profession. And so we want to recognize that those candidates should be paid because they are adding value to the classroom. And we have great data from mentors, and we have great data from principals that student achievement increases when there is a resident in the classroom with a qualified mentor. And so having residents and a cohort of residents at your school can have great impact on student learning as well as school culture. And so we want to recognize that the residents are adding to the school culture and impacting student learning.
Thank you, Jill. I'm going to turn to Mary's question, and Zach's going to chat another report. We do a lot of writing across our organizations. He's going to chat another report that was out very recently that literally does a kind of a side-by-side of some of the registered apprenticeship program concepts and what the residency concepts are. It was designed specifically for that. Particularly inside that report, Mary, there is, I believe it's in a footnote, a link to the standards that the Department of Labor has for a registered apprenticeship program. And those standards would look probably pretty different from standards that a residency program might design in some ways. So because they are competency-based about skills, and many of the competency-based pieces inside a teacher preparation program would be more complex than sort of discrete skills. They'd be kind of holistic. I think that's a general potential difference between the two. They're not at all unalignable. They're totally alignable. But as they currently sit in documentation, they probably do look a little bit different. And if that report is helpful, that's great. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
And just to add on there, the state of Tennessee has put out a playbook for apprenticeships. And so when you walk through that playbook and the design of the apprenticeship model, you will see that it absolutely aligns to the definition of teacher residencies. Where I feel like the definition is more robust and helpful is thinking about the articulating, going deeper to describe the clinical experience for the candidate, as well as the curriculum. So those are some places where I think that the residency model or the definition can work complementary to the requirements of the apprenticeship.
There's there are a couple more mentoring questions. Suzanne, hello, haven't seen you in a while. I'll just share that in our project, we do what we call parallel processing, where clearly you need a strong mentor for this fall, right? So you want somebody who already has those qualities. At the same time, if we just wait every summer to find somebody for this fall, we're going to have the same challenge every year. So our project works with supporting entire school development places where you can support your residency development. And this year we might be actually preparing people who even 2 years out would be the mentor teachers. That obviously supports their connection to the school, gives them more of the supports they might need to stay in the profession, et cetera. So sort of a parallel process of get the people to be quality for this year that you need and simultaneously develop people for the future.
Thanks, Karen. And a couple of program examples would be the PEBC or Better Teacher Residency Program. As they were expanding into rural communities, they determined that they wanted to make the investment in mentors first before launching teacher residency programs in those rural settings. And so they worked with districts to support the mentors, to grow the mentors, and provide professional development in order to create a cadre of mentors who are ready to become mentors to teacher residents. And when the Seattle Teacher Residency Program launched, the union in Seattle Public Schools had identified star teachers. And so those star teachers were the first cohort. It was like a screening, really, to identify who should be potential mentors for the residency program. So again, thinking about districts, kind of mining the talent that they have, working with different partners in order to identify those mentors and to develop those mentors.
And I think we might have time for one more. Lashunda is in there. If I hope I've got your name right. Lashunda, so we have worked with Center X at UCLA. I'm sure there are many, many great places that focus on this work, but in terms of our network, Center X is sort of beyond the pale in terms of thinking about this very question. They don't always have mentors of color available, though they work hard to tap mentors of color who have not historically been tapped. And they often are needing to place people who are not exactly the same kinds of great matches. They have a week where the mentors and the residents work together to understand like what their potential biases might be, how they can work together and build more respect and practice the kinds of things we need to practice in order to have the educational system, both for the adults in the system and the increasingly diverse population of adults in the system we see, and also for the students inside the classroom. So I would check with Center X at UCLA for a lot more great information on that.
And I just love that we're having the opportunity to share with you examples from programs across the country and how they are wrestling with these challenges. And one last resource and researcher to share with you is thinking about affinity groups and that we provide an opportunity for residents and graduates of a residency program to be members of affinity groups so that to the Lashunda's question there, in order to address that sense of belonging and the opportunity to work in a cohort where you have shared goals because you're working together to become better teachers and you feel a sense of affinity. So Travis Bristol has done a ton of research. We love to lean on his research for affinity groups, which can be one way to address the issue of kind of the disproportionality of mentors of color. I think we're going to kick it to Sabrina to close us out. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today.
Thank you so much, all.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Again, we would like to thank everyone for joining us today on this beautiful conversation on the definition of teacher residencies. And we'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and engaging in conversation. We all appreciate you for all the hard work that you have done. Again, we remind folks to please join us at thepathwaysalliance.org, visit our site, sign up for our newsletter, sign up for any upcoming working groups that we have. Please engage with us. And we hope that you enjoy this document that folks have worked so hard on, and we cannot wait to hear the feedback. We will also be sending out this recording to folks who could not join today and the folks that were able to join today. So you'll be receiving that as well with all of these lovely reports and resources that have been added in the chat. Thank you all and have a good one.